Star Wars 7x7, episode 2055. Today, Voices is the name of our Clone Wars episode that we're doing a briefing on which we're doing a briefing. This is episode 11 from season 6 of the Clone Wars. Here we go. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. So here's your standard disclaimer from these days. It's a full spoiler briefing. We're talking about Voices. This is the second of 4 episodes that make up the final story arc in Clone Wars Season 6, and that means that we are getting very close to Season 7 of the Clone Wars, which is coming out on Friday, February 21st, and our first briefing for that will happen on the 22nd. Anyway, let's talk about what we're here to talk about, though, which is voices and Yoda hearing, well, one voice in particular, I believe, is what this episode should be. Maybe it should be named Voice, perhaps, although he does hear other voices later in the episode, but the one voice that is prime in consideration for this episode is the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn. And yes, it is in fact Liam Neeson who is coming back to voice Qui-Gon Jinn for this episode. So Yoda is meditating deeply within the Force, trying to understand just what is going on after the big reveals about Dooku being Lord Tyrannus and ultimately the clone army having been ordered and set up by their enemy. He's meditating deeply, trying to figure this out. And here's the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn, thinks he's going nuts, but Qui-Gon says, nope, I'm the real deal, and blows out candles in Yoda's room and actually levitates Yoda himself. So Yoda, of course, doesn't know what to make of this because apparently this is unprecedented. And it's hard to consider at this particular moment in time, and what I mean by that is 2014 when these episodes were released, because we're used to the notion of Force ghosts. At least we've been used to that idea since 1983, right? But in chronology, in the actual chronological order of the Clone Wars, this is not something that's happened. And so Yoda thinks that he's going crazy. Ki-Adi-Mundi, which is, I believe, how Mace Windu pronounced it, thinks that Yoda may be susceptible to some sort of Sith deception, and that possibly the fact that Count Dooku was his apprentice might make him more vulnerable to attack by the Sith. That the Sith might actually target Yoda as the primary way to sow chaos and disorder within the Jedi Order. Which is kind of nuts to think about, of course. But then again, you know, they don't know what's going on at this point, and the dark side has clouded all of their judgments, so they're just grasping at straws. But Yoda asks for the council to help him figure out just what is going on, and they all meditate with him in the Jedi Council's chambers for what looks to be a full day, and don't hear any voices that Yoda was hearing. So now Mace Windu and Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ki-Adi-Mundi are very concerned about this. So they have Yoda go to a Jedi doctor who says everything looks fine, but there is a certain part of Yoda's brain in the back of his head, like occipital lobe kind of stuff, if it were equated to a human brain, that's firing up more than any other situation the Doctor has seen in a Jedi, but that might have to do with the fact that he's approaching 900 years old, so who knows with Yoda's biology? I mean, his biology is practically unknown for all intents and purposes. So the Doctor recommends a deprivation ritual, which is basically putting Yoda in the equivalent of a float tank, right? A sensory deprivation tank, except that they're also going to lower his oxygen levels to near nothing to induce a deep meditative state. Deeper than anything that Jedi are able to achieve on their own. And the idea is that, for better or worse, this is going to allow Yoda to find the source of the voice that he's hearing in his head. And he does, and he actually has a vision of himself on Dagobah having a conversation with Qui-Gon Jinn, and Qui-Gon says, come to Dagobah and come alone, and this is not the way that you need to be solving this problem, presumably meaning being in the tank. Meanwhile, on the outside of the tank, Obi-Wan's freaking out and thinking that there's trouble for Yoda. He could be in mortal danger and insists the doctor interrupt the ritual despite the fact that that could be dangerous in and of itself. They get Yoda out, but he starts muttering about having talked to the dead. And so this is even more concerning for the other Jedi around. And Mace Windu asks for temple guards to be posted in Yoda's room just in case. Just in case what? In case Yoda is being taken over by the dark side somehow, perhaps. But with some timely help from Anakin Skywalker and R2-D2, Yoda is able to escape from the Jedi Temple and fly to Dagobah, which means R2-D2 has been to Dagobah, and 2 decades before the events of The Empire Strikes Back. So this begs some questions like, did Yoda recognize R2-D2? Or did R2-D2 recognize Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back? Or did R2-D2 ever say to Luke, oh yeah, Dagobah, I've been there before? Like, no, probably not, just based on the interactions that happened in The Empire Strikes Back. But, oh man, that opens a can of worms. But we'll have to leave that be for the time being. And instead talk about the fact that Qui-Gon's training was not complete, and so he's not able to manifest himself as a full, look like himself ghost being. He's only able to manifest like little lights flying around, basically, but he is able to talk to Yoda when Yoda says, all right, I'm here, Qui-Gon, what now? And Qui-Gon explains that there are actually 2 kinds of force. He tells Yoda that there's the living force, and all living things generate this, and it powers the wellspring that is the cosmic force. And up till now, and this is expressed by Ki-Adi-Mundi in the episode earlier on, the notion of somebody retaining their identity after death has not been heard of before, and the presumption is that everyone is just absorbed into the cosmic force, and that, as they say, is that. Apparently not entirely the case, and Yoda is going to learn, as Qui-Gon had started to learn, that there's a way to preserve one's life force so that they can manifest a consciousness that can commune with the living after death. And Yoda has been selected, he has been chosen, presumably by the cosmic force, as one of the rare few Jedi to whom this training will be imparted. But to do so, he has to continue on his journey all the way back to a planet that was one of the very first wellsprings of life in the galaxy. And that's where we are left as a cliffhanger for this episode. But there is one particular question that Yoda has for Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon gives him an answer of sorts, which I'll explain for you after the break. Stay tuned. Hey Rebel Rouser, I've made some changes to the asteroid belt level at patreon.com/SW7X7, and they are all with sponsors in mind. So if you want to get the word out about your business, your product, your service to a dedicated Star Wars audience, then please check out patreon.com/SW7X7 and look for the asteroid belt level for details. Again, that's patreon.com/SW7X7. Welcome back. So, Yoda asks Qui-Gon if he knows who the Sith Lord is, and Qui-Gon says, I know where you can go to find out. Sends him to a cave not unlike the one Luke went into in The Empire Strikes Back. And in there, Yoda has terrible visions. Visions of Jedi fighting against clones, visions of a Sith Lord killing Jedi, visions of Revenge of the Sith when a Sith Lord throws Mace Windu out a window and he hears Sidious, Sidious, Sidious over and over again. And an image of Sidious rises as we know him, the hood over his eyes and everything, and he says, join me, it's the only way, ah! And Yoda obviously is very disturbed by these visions and asks Qui-Gon what the deal is with it. Is this really happening? And Qui-Gon says, as long as the Clone Wars continue to rage, etc., yeah, this is going to happen, and this is only a small peek at how powerful the dark side really is, but there is hope. It's going to be in the unlikeliest of places, and you have to keep an eye out for it and seize the opportunity the moment you see it. So, yeah, that's pretty heavy stuff, to be sure. And that, for the time being at least, is all we're going to say about Voices, Season 6, Episode 11 from the Clone Wars, and that's going to do it for this episode of the show as well. Thank you so much for joining me for it, as always. and may the Force be with you wherever in the galaxy you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2020 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.